If you've ever found yourself in that spot where you're trying to quit porn and you make that big decision and you're done and you sign off, and then like the next day or maybe the next week or a few days later, whatever it is, you're just right back at it, and then you find yourself in this cycle, and it's like so strange because every time you're fully committed, you're done, you're fed up, you stop, and then you fall right back off the wagon the next week. Well, this episode is for you because today we're going to be unpacking how the brain is involved. And when you begin to understand what's going on in your brain, you begin to understand how to work with that to change what's happening so that you can actually break free of this addiction. We're also going to look at the important role that shame plays and get into a little bit of that, and even how you might be trying to use shame to help, but it's actually doing the opposite of that. And we're also going to be looking at getting underneath like that sort of basic interpretive layer that a lot of folks put on porn use when they say, I'm just horny. That's why I look at it. I get horny. I don't know what else is going on. And we're going to try to go down beneath that, get into some of the deeper things that are happening here today. So if you've tried to quit and you have been able to, this is the show for you. So stick with us, and we're going to have a good time unpacking this together and hopefully some great learning moments as we go through it. So welcome to our kitchen table. My name is Caleb Smoney-Gandel.
And I'm Verlinda.
We're a husband and wife team. We're both therapists. And I've been treating porn addicts for over 15 years now. It's an area of specialty for me, so I'll probably be taking a lot of the content for this show.
Yep.
But we're glad that you could join us, and we have some important things to share with you today.
Yeah. So why, like the age-old question, right? Like, why can't I quit? So when people come to us, like, why can't I quit?
Yeah.
What do you have to say?
Well, there's three things that we're going to get into, but the first part I want to look at in the brain is just to understand, like in those moments when you really want to look at porn and you have that big desire to look at it, or the interest or the curiosity or the craving, whatever you want to call that, the part of your brain that has the desire to do that thing and the part of your brain that sees the consequence of doing that thing, those two parts in your brain are not connected. And that's the very simple version of what we're going to be diving into here today. Verlin and I have talked about this before, but that's the very simple version of what happens in your brain. And so we want to help folks learn how to begin to build that neural pathway between the desire and the consequence.
So when, like, you often hear people when we're working with them say, like, what was I thinking? Or else their spouse is like, what were they thinking? Like, yes. I'm right here.
Yeah. And that's a super common question, but what's so fascinating about this is really they weren't thinking, or at least there wasn't thinking, there wasn't brain activity between the desire to do the thing and the consequence. Your spouse is going to be superbly upset. You know what the boundaries are that she set. You might have to move to the basement or move out of the house if this is whatever they are, right? Like all those things can happen. You could lose your job at work if you're using it on a work computer, all this stuff. But the desire and the consequence part of the brain, not connected. There's no thinking going between those two parts.
Okay.
That's part of this addiction.
So afterwards, they can obviously see the consequences and know what's going to happen.
When they're in the consequences, it's obvious.
But when they're in like the impulse or the desire, they don't see those.
Yes.
So what actually happens? What actually happens in the brain?
Okay. So I'm going to nerd out a little bit here with some big words. And I actually...
Good at that.
Thank you. I have an undergraduate degree in biology. I studied all this stuff when I was in university, but that was a long time ago. And there's so many parts of the brain, I forget all the words. So I got them written down here. Okay. But we're going to unpack this a little bit because it's really fascinating to watch. If this is like super nerdy for you, just like bear with me for a few minutes because I already gave you the summarized version, which is the part of your brain that wants to do the thing is not connected to the part of your brain that sees the consequence for doing that thing. That's the simple version. This is the complicated version. Okay. So in the center of our brain, and what we might call like the more primitive part of our brain, is something called the Mesolimbic dopamine pathway. And that is the wanting part of addiction.
Okay.
Where it's working in the midbrain, it's going to the forebrain. It's all about like a moment when like there's a dopamine release associated with this exciting thing that you're going to or coming back to. That's where the hit happens. So when I work mostly with guys, but we work with women as well. So forgive me if I get the gender's little male biased here. There are more and more women coming for treatment, but in the past it has been a majority men getting treatment. But when guys come to me, they understand this thing about the hit, like the high. And there's certain parts of what they're looking at which gives them a particular high. When they're going to pornography, And that occurs in this pathway in what's called the nucleus accumbens. Accumbens. I'm not really sure how to even say it.
Okay.
But you get this hit there. But the thing is, like, your brain gets less responsive to that dopamine hit every time. Mm-hmm. And that's often why the frequency of pornography use escalates, or the duration, like how long you use it for in one sitting, or the intensity of what you're watching. That's why that often increases over time, because your brain gets less responsive. Now, the other part of this too is that your brain gets less responsive to natural rewards, because the thing that you're looking at online is more intense than what you experience in person with a real human being. Because it's designed to stimulate these pathways to become addictive, because that's how the pornography industry makes billions of dollars a year. So not only is like there more and more severe porn, but your body's natural response to a real human being in a sexual context actually decreases. And a lot of men are experiencing porn-induced erectile dysfunction. So this is all happening, this very primitive part of the brain. And this is happening even if you don't like the fact that you use porn and you want to stop. It doesn't stop this process.
Okay.
The fact that you want to stop it.
Right. The process is still happening even though you don't want it to be there.
Yeah, there's this biological activity, this neurochemical activity that's happening in your brain regardless, because you're using this addictive behavior. Okay?
Okay.
Now, another thing that's going on is the amygdala is connected to this, and this is more about why this perpetuates itself. And that's where like stress and negative emotions show up in the body. Okay? So not only then is this addiction like addictive in its own rights, requires more and more intensity, but it also can medicate stress and negative emotions.
Okay.
And the dopamine released from the nucleus accumbens that happens when you look at pornography, it reaches that area of the brain where the stress, so you're kind of bathing that thing in like happy juice fluids. Okay, that was like a Freudian slip. In like positive neurochemicals. Positive neurochemicals, okay? And that obviously decreases the stress. Just keep laughing at me. I'm gonna keep going.
You just keep going.
You can't do work like this and not like step in it once in a while. Okay, so that's going on.
Yes.
Now,
these neurochemicals are hitting the stress portion.
Yeah, it's treating stress. Another thing for Linda is it's also hitting the hippocampus, and that's where memory is stored. And another thing that I like to talk to clients about is euphoric recall. If you ask a person who uses pornography, there is both the use of it that's exciting, but then there's like you're at work, you're bored. Man, I can't wait till I get home, have a few minutes with some porn and just get a break from this all. And there's this really sort of happy, euphoric idea that comes with the idea of acting out and using pornography. Euphoric recall. So that is also tied into all of this because memory is stored in the hippocampus. It's part of the same dopamine pathway.
Okay. So what is being recalled? Like, is the porn being recalled? Or
like just past recall, the excitement of past.
The excitement of it.
What you might find, what you might discover, new things you might see, something you noticed last time but didn't take more time to check out that could be available to you this time.
Okay.
It's like being excited to go on another date with your new girlfriend.
Okay.
Right? That would be the normal pathway for this kind of thing, but this all gets used by the same addictive behaviors.
Yes. Okay.
And this is part of what reinforces the addiction.
So the dopamine has affected this area as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's affecting that area. Okay. So that's one spot, like it's fairly like in the middle of your brain. Now, there's another part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain, and...
like your rational thinking brain.
Yes. Higher level thinking happens there. Okay? And that's the part that controls, like, decision-making. It controls impulse control, or moderates impulse control, and problem solving. So those, all the things that you need to say, that's probably not a good idea to do that when I get home. I should go for a jog instead, or take a shower and walk the dog or something, right? Mm-hmm. So what happens to it? There's two parts there, the orbitofrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex that are out there, and they're involved in weighing consequences and in regulating behavior. Okay. Really helping you decide whether something is good to do or not. And in addiction, these things become impaired. And not only are they impaired, but there's no direct neural pathway back to that Mesolimbic dopamine pathway that we were talking about earlier, to the more primitive parts of the brain that are getting excited.
Okay.
So this is the disconnect that I was talking about. And this is why quite often when it comes to, like when people reflect back on why they relapsed or why they chose porn when they're trying to stop, they will say things like, I wasn't thinking, or I don't care anymore. I just stopped caring and I look at it anyways. That's describing the disconnect between the two parts of the brain. Or sometimes, like, again, when we're a little further into the work and I'm talking to folks about this, they'll say, you know what, by the time I get there, like far enough into their sequence of what they do leading up to pornography, I just wasn't aware of the consequences anymore. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it's too late to intervene on yourself because everything's being driven by this most primitive part of your brain. And this smart, wiser, decision-making, regulating, is that a good idea part is just, it's offline. It's not able to push back on this thing in here.
Yeah. So that's why people can be like, well, I should know better.
Yes, because when they're sitting in your therapy office, they're calm and they can see all the consequences and how it all happens.
This is all online at that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that all make sense?
Yep.
So those, like the more desire-driven circuits, they dominate, and the complex rational ones, they get weakened here. And then to get sober, like there's two things that have to happen. And this is where I was telling you that I give you, like, here's how you need to use your brain to begin to undo this. Okay. So one thing that needs to happen is a combination of both these things. First is you have to deprive that mesolimbic dopamine pathway, that thing that gets excited, that gets reinforced, that medicates, that doesn't think about consequences. You have to deprive that from highs so that it reorients itself to normal, healthy pleasures.
Okay. So you have to stop.
But this is the topic of our episode, is why can't I stop?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'd frame it more like this, is a lot of times folks will try to like back off the depth of porn they're using, and they'll be able to sort of back it up to what they call more vanilla porn, like just straightforward stuff, if I can call it that. I'm just kind of being sensitive to like the YouTube world out there right now and not getting into details. So the more vanilla porn, okay, away from the extreme stuff, and then maybe they'll back it up to like swimsuits or lingerie, so it's like hardly even nudity anymore. But the thing is, they're still hitting these pathways, and this is actually why abstinence is often an important part at the start of recovery, especially because it just has to be depriving that thing so the brain can reattune itself to like interactions with your wife, your girlfriend, whatever the case may be. Or if you're single, just like good affection from friends around you, that kind of stuff. So yeah, there is like a just stop part, but it needs to happen in tandem with this other thing. That's why it's a combination. And the other thing is you have to begin to plant that neural pathway between the desire and the consequence parts of your brain, the two separate parts. And now, for some of you that are listening, it might work if you're not too far into this addiction. It might work for you to literally just begin to remind yourself in a very tangible way of the consequences that you've experienced using porn. Like contemplate losing your job, contemplate losing your girlfriend, or even like this escalating enough until there's a divorce, you lose your wife and family. And when you kind of sit in like, not so much the shame, but like the grief, especially of what you might lose or what you are losing or what you have lost because of your pornography use, and you do that right in the moments when you feel desire, your brain begins to establish a neural pathway between those two things. Oh, I want to do this thing. Oh, that comes with some really bad consequences. Right?
Okay. So if you can get your if you can think about the consequences kind of at the beginning of that sequence you talked about.
Yes.
Then you can connect the two.
Yes.
But once you're kind of so far down the sequence, then the rational part of your brain's offline.
Yes.
Decision making's offline. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And obviously, like, there's a lot more to this that we do in therapy with like connecting it to, okay, what are you going to do when you have desires? You come up with a sobriety plan, like an action plan when you're near the start of a relapse, stuff like that. Like, there's a lot more, but this is kind of the basic neural part of it that I wanted to tackle today.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So you mentioned shame.
Can I back up one more sec before we go to shame? is another thing that I do here working with clients is a technique from brain spotting, from a particular part of the brain spotting therapy modality that is great for addictions, that actually helps wire the connection in your brain between the desire part of your brain and the consequence part of your brain. And then we often also wire it to an ideal sober future where you're in happy relationship, usually with a significant other or something like that. And that work is fascinating work to do in a session. It definitely feels like a little bit woo-woo, but I notice like every time I do it, the next session they come back, they're like, yeah, I didn't really have a desire to look at porn this week. And essentially what's happened is with that intensity and the technique that we use there, that forms enough of a pathway that the consequence pollutes the desire. And the two things, yes, instead of like desire having this whole big story about some fantasy that I can get into and all this amazing stuff, it's now the story of the desire. It stays intact, but there's a story of consequence, and those two become connected. They begin to feel like the same story. Whereas in addiction and untreated, when that neural pathway is not established, they're two separate stories. So I just want to say that so that you know that there are things that can be done too. If this isn't working, just kind of watching the video and working this on your own, there are levels of intervention we can step through and increase to get folks help so you can get sober and you can quit porn and you can restore normal intimacy in your life. Now let's do shame.
Okay. You talked about shame fueling.
Yes.
And then often people will use shame to kind of control it. Like if I feel bad enough, maybe I won't do it again. But then that's actually hurting.
Actually hurts,
fueling it. So what can you elaborate on shame?
Yeah. So not everybody experiences shame around pornography use. Like there are a segment of people that don't see porn as like a morally problematic thing, but they're bothered by the fact that it's compulsive and they're addicted.
Yeah.
And they can't stop. And so this part of the discussion might not be as relevant for that segment of the population. I mean, it's still great to stop, and there's lots to think about for consequences, but this is generally for those that have like a great deal of what we call moral incongruence around pornography use, where you just feel like this is wrong and I need to stop. Like it doesn't fit your value system. It's not who I am. Those kinds of phrases I often hear, right? And what's interesting to me there is obviously shame is a huge topic, but one of the things that I see clients often trying to do is to use shame to stop themselves from using porn. So if I beat myself up about being a turd and what a loathsome piece of junk I am, then maybe I won't do this thing. So it's like I'm trying to shame myself into sobriety. Okay. But the problem is like that there is nothing better to treat shame than pornography.
Yeah.
Okay. And the air quotes are because it creates more shame.
Right. It's very effective.
It's very effective, but it's a maladaptive coping mechanism. It's not healthy. So because when you come to pornography, the images that you hit with are of people that desire you, that long for you, that want you, that validate you, that like just you, like you're the person they're looking for. And those are all messages that like try to undo shame. They're like the antithesis of shame. But when you look at pornography and it's an action that has moral incongruence for you, you feel shameful about what you've done afterwards. So the painkiller becomes the pain. And this is part of the cycle of pornography. And one of the big things actually to breaking out of this is reducing the shame as you go along. So if you've been using shame to try to get yourself to stop, I would just say, like, how's that working for you? And I'm guessing when you're thinking about that, you're going to realize it's not working for you. And then I would say, what if we could just step away from shame for a minute and just kind of leave the shame aside? And it kind of brings me to my next point, and like, what's underneath this thing? Why are we doing this? Because I just mentioned, like, and that was a clue, that it's a maladaptive coping mechanism, which means you're using that pornography to treat some deeper feelings in yourself that are hard to bear.
Yes.
And I always find that those feelings are valid. They're not morally wrong. They're not shameful. But just take a feeling like loneliness, for example, a deep-seated loneliness, maybe from your childhood, maybe from your place in life right now, where you're at, maybe in the fact that for several years you haven't cultivated the relationship with your partner that you long to have. So even though you're partnered or married, you feel lonely in that relationship. So and this is just one feeling, right? But if we can get to that loneliness and find healthy ways to take care of that, to actually address it, to meet that need in ways that are wholesome, that leave you feeling more connected and more like a healthy person, a person who chooses good things, who chooses wellness, who chooses life, right? That undoes shame, and it undoes this shame cycle that comes with pornography, where I feel like crap, so I look at porn, and then I feel like crap, so I'm going to look at porn again, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So that kind of...
Because in the short term, the porn does answer these longings.
It alleviates it.
It alleviates them.
It is a painkiller.
Yeah. But that's only in the short term.
Only in the short term, with consequences for you, for the people recording it, for people who may discover it, that shouldn't discover it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
In your body, your brain.
Yeah.
So shame is another huge reason why it's so hard to quit. And ironically, I find so many of my clients trying to use shame to stop when it's the thing that's perpetuating it.
Yeah.
So that's a good inside tip there.
I remember you telling me a statistic one time that something about like the more shame a person has, the more they hide it. So the more shame they have, and it like, yes, it alleviates in the short term, but it's escalating it.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So shame also promotes secrecy, which also promotes pornography addiction.
Yeah.
For example, hiding, feeling less than. So you want this thing that makes you feel better.
Yeah. And the more you think you need to hide it, the more shame you have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So not everybody has shame. You mentioned that. And there's some people who just think like, well, I'm just horny. Like I just need this release.
Yeah.
Or they're even socialized to think that that's okay. So some people have the shame, some people don't. But like how would you respond to that?
Yeah.
Be like, well, I'm just horny. That's why I use it.
Yeah. And to clarify, I mean, this part happens both for people that experience a lot of shame with the pornography use and people that don't. It's just, they share this in common. I just use it because I'm horny. Mm-hmm. And I get it. There's a validity to that. But what I discover inevitably when I begin to unpack that is that the horniness is like the euphoric recall in response to the difficult feelings that I'm experiencing that I have learned because of this part of my brain that gets rewarded can be treated with pornography. Okay?
Okay. So I feel these uncomfortable feelings.
Yes.
I don't like them. My brain is like almost trying to protect me from them.
Yeah.
Gives me this reminder or this euphoric recall.
Yeah.
And then I think I'm just getting horny.
Yes.
Okay.
That's often what's going on. And quite often like that euphoric recall, that the idea of the pornography gets associated with one's sex drive because it's arousing.
Yeah.
And the sex drive, people often too, like mentally in their brain go like, I want this thing and it satisfies me. So it's like hunger. So everybody gets hungry once in a while and they eat. So I get horny once in a while. I'm going to look at porn.
Okay.
Okay. But like hunger is a much more basic biological instinct to get nutrition into your body because you can't live without food, but you can live without ejaculating or orgasming. You can actually do that. It's possible. It's not the life many of us want, but you can do it. But you can't live without food. So we also just kind of have to watch for like what we call stinking thinking, which is like you're associating I'm hungry for sex with I'm hungry for food. It's a hunger. I should take care of it. That's one of the ways that we rationalize the use of pornography or turning to pornography as a coping mechanism. And again, like all of that is like, it just promotes this sense of helplessness because I've got this drive. I have to take care of it. It lowers inhibition. I just go do it.
Poor me.
Poor me. And that's part of rationalizing the addiction too.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then you layer on top of that, Verlinda, and going back to the guys' side of thing here, especially in our culture, there's a very prevalent idea that men need release. Like they need to ejaculate in order to be healthy, and there's blue balls and all this different kind of stuff. And yeah, I've looked it up, and there is some documentation that that for some men experience pain in their testicles when they don't ejaculate for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But the body also has like nocturnal emissions where it can naturally take care of backups, if you want to think about it that way, in the testicles. So there are built-in natural bodily mechanisms. You're not going to die if you don't ejaculate.
Right.
And so even that cultural script is not valid. And I kind of mentioned that like there's this whole layer of feelings underneath it. And we've talked about medicating. And that's the part I want to get to here is for when you find yourself thinking, I'm just horny, I need to do this. I actually want you to like pause and just stop there for a minute and try to like step back from the I'm just horny and go underneath that and say like, what am I feeling? What am I actually experiencing emotionally right now? I got put down at work. I'm feeling shame about that. My dad called me and ragged on me for not getting my mom a big enough gift for Mother's Day. My partner is nagging me. I feel horrible because I'm not being the husband I always wanted to be. Like all this stuff could be going on. And I've kind of mentioned like experiences. So therefore I'm hurt. I'm lonely. I'm angry. I'm tired. Maybe I'm hungry. Maybe I'm bored. And you have all those feelings, right? Going on underneath this thing. And it's good to begin to train your brain that, okay, I have that feeling. And of course I would want to go to pornography right now to distract me from that.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Nobody really notices their hunger partway through a peak sexual experience. I need to stop and go for a snack. I'll be right back. Right? Like it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like this thing does work to medicate even that very basic feeling, but all the way down to loneliness and all this other stuff. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit here. Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. Because it's answering those feelings. The big feelings.
It's trying to meet a need.
It's trying to meet a need.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, you mentioned the word longing before, and now we're talking about feelings. Like, do you differentiate between the two of those? Or like you said, every time, or it's always a valid longing? So how are the longings and the feelings related?
Well, humans have good question. I think we have longings, maybe I could say, that lead to feelings. Like we have a longing to be in relationship. Not everybody has a longing to be partnered. Like some people enjoy singlehood, but single people enjoy deep friendships.
Yeah.
Coupled people enjoy deep friendships, or people that want to be in a couple enjoy deep friendships. So there's a longing for connection. And even if we just take that longing by itself, right? When we're at a place in our life where we're not experiencing that because we've moved, or we get so far into this addiction that we've neglected building relationships and we're isolated at work, at home, at church, whatever, then that longing is there, but it's unmet. And it's going to show up in my body as the feeling of loneliness or sadness, grief for what I'm missing.
Yep.
Or being left out, that kind of stuff, right? And those feelings aren't immoral.
Yeah.
There's no reason to have shame. Like if you're lonely and you're not in good relationships and life's hard because of that, that sucks. It sucks. And those feelings come up to tell you, hey, can we try to take care of this? Can we step towards something, some kind of group, some friend that I used to be in touch with, like pick that up again, reconnect with my spouse, maybe with children, I don't know, whatever it might be. But is there some way, like, can we use that feeling to make a choice that's going to take care of that in a healthy way?
So the feelings aren't bad. The longings aren't bad.
No.
But where we take them may not be healthy.
Yes.
So you're saying, like, yeah, feel the feelings, stop and figure out what you're feeling, and then where can I take that?
Yes. Yes.
That will leave me feeling healthy and thriving and
exactly
positive.
Exactly. Because if you get home at the end of the day and you're in a family and like everybody's gone off doing their thing and you got disconnected and you've got this pornography addiction, you're gonna hit the ground and be like, oh, I should look at porn. I'm horny. And you're not going to notice that sort of flash of, man, I feel lonely. I wish I was with my kids at their game right now. Or I wish I could take my wife out for a date tonight, but things are rough. Like you miss all that. And what we need to do is go back to that and start to take actions to take care of those things in ways that are not shame inducing, that lead us to more wholeness and connection. And I get it. Like sometimes marriages are in a tough spot and all these other things. So start a conversation about getting a marriage therapist, right? Or there's just other things that can be chosen. We lose sight of that because this porn thing always jumps in and goes, hey, I got something fun that you can do. And that's the euphoric recall, and I'm horny, and off I go.
Right. And then I don't need, or I don't think I need, in the moment, I don't think I need my relationships or.
Right. And that kind of gets us back to our title of why it's so hard to quit this thing is because you're not taking care of the thing that the porn is actually medicating or attempting to medicate.
Yeah. That's good.
Does that make sense?
Deep.
Yes. So that valid longing for connection, like find a way to desexualize that, first of all, to just be in relationship with people and honor that longing and curate like good, wholesome connections with good people that lift you up, that build you up. Establish, like learn how to do emotional intimacy and connection with friends. Not just over text message, definitely not just on social media, but in person as well, or for phone calls or video calls, whatever you can do at work, lunch appointments with a good friend or lunch dates with your spouse, like whoever's in your world, just begin to build those things out. And then also look for community. So you have like people that you're very close to, that you're very tight with. You have a little bit wider circle of 3 to 5 good friends. Like those are the dudes that you call when you need to move house. And then you have like your wider community of like, I'm involved with the church. I'm involved with a group. I'm doing something in the community. I'm on a sports team. The guys you go hunting with every year, whatever it might be, or gals. But just begin to build those things back out, because quite often when folks are in the middle of this addiction, a lot of that has gone by the wayside.
Yeah.
And it's really turned
It's the
down.
only place to be. It's not something you talk about a lot.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Well,
all right.
That's all for today's episode. You can get the full show notes at therapabo.com/288.